that speaks the truths and peace, and you don't go against them. What you do is you bring things to light, and you actually say, these are some of the concerns of the people, for the people. Why isn't this being addressed?
Cutting off Christian and Iraqis' heads is not a hate crime.
Patriot is not out there on the front line seeing what they can tear down. They're seeing what they can bring together to cultivate America as a whole. We've been torn apart.
You can't judge. People shouldn't judge Islam off of the basis of Muslims, and that goes with anything else. That you can have. People are people.
Muslims died in the World Trade Center, idiot! Yeah, Muslims died in the World Trade Center!
A lot of stuff happens behind the lines too. You get a lot of chatter, you get a lot of people who are out there who fuel off of that. So now you have people out there that are at a rally for other intended purposes that you never even thought that they were there for. Like they're coming up with their own reasons.
Right to defend myself. I have the right to actually use physical violence within the law to defend myself. But just because I can do that doesn't mean I should go intentionally and provoke.
Racist out of Tucson! 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 Racist out of Tucson!
I think the most powerful thing a person can do is tell the truth. That's the most powerful thing a person can do.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances.
The First Amendment to the United States Constitution is arguably the most important in our country towards the ideas of a self-governed and free society. Our First Amendment right of the citizen is broken into 6 parts. This story takes a closer look how these rights play out beyond the brief newscast within the state of Arizona.
Our country was founded on the concept of freedom for all. The act of building a coalition through productive communication can only make us as Americans stronger as we protect the rights and freedoms of all. On May 29, 2015, retired Marine John Ritzheimer organized a freedom of speech protest rally at the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix. His concern is with the growth and cultivation of the ideology of radical political Islam being systematically implemented through the means of Sharia law within the United States. Our First Amendment rights were certainly put to the test at the rally. The rally you are about to see features shock tactics, inflammatory demeanor, and a disrespect that certainly would not be tolerated in a society ruled by an extremist ideology such as political Islam. To Ritzheimer's surprise, however, the rally was met by a counter-protest that drew hundreds of people who stood up to the intimidation in defense of our right to the free exercise of religion. This story is not about Ritzheimer whose controversial actions made quite a spectacle in our national news through his radical style of activism. This feature is about two much less theatrical activists. What they both lack in entertainment value to the masses, they make up with real passion, logic, reason, while being deeply centered in their own core values in a quest for a better America. One is a self-proclaimed patriot and military veteran, Dean Remington, who wishes to adequately address the subject of radical Islam in America with a complete focus on the issues. The other, a human rights activist and practicing Muslim, Samaya Daoud, who simply wanted to address the current issues of bigotry, racism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia, all wrapped into a philosophy of hate. Both were inspired to organize similar events, a rally and a counter-protest in Tucson, Arizona.
A big interest of mine is social justice, and it's something I've done off and on for a long time. I mean, I would say really around 2003, when I was at the U of A, was when I really started getting into politics and social movement and things of that nature. And it's hard to say how it started. I think it just it was one of those interests that developed. So just to kind of give you a little bit of history, I've been interested on these types of things for a long time, going to marches and rallies and protests, but not just that type of activism. Going to lectures, having dialogues, attending discussion groups, being on committees, seeing like what can we do to make the world a better place? What can we do to speak out against injustice? What can we do to fix these things?
So, in other words, you spent your personal time and effort seeking out information.
Absolutely.
And details.
And that's another thing is it's very important for me to try to get the facts. I don't just believe what a news article says. I don't just believe what somebody says. And I think that's very important because no matter what the facts are, it's human nature that everybody wants their own angle to it. They want their own slant. And you have to be I feel like you have to really kind of be a researcher. You have to really find out what's going on. You can't just take a piece here or there. You have to understand the problem first before you can really start looking for solutions. And that's the problem in society today is usually it's just jumping to conclusions. People have knee-jerk emotional reactions versus careful, logical thought.
Analogy.
Exactly.
What inspired you to do this protest in Tucson?
Well, that's a good question. I am a convert to Islam, and I go to the mosques in general, pretty regularly. And in May, there was an anti-Islam protest, led by John Ritzheimer. And there were a lot of very bigoted people that showed up. Many of them had, guns, and there were actually, some of them were neo-Nazis, and threats of violence had even been made. So I was at that protest. I was at the counter-protest, to stand with the mosque and, to speak out against hate. And this was in Phoenix. And not long, just a few days or so after that rally was over with, I then happened to notice online that there was a similar type of rally planned, an anti-Islam protest planned in Tucson against, the Islamic Center of Tucson. And so to me, it was like, okay, they're going to try to create like a pattern of this. And, and it just so happens I've also been to the mosque, to this mosque here in Tucson as well. And, and I used to live in Tucson, so I decided, I wanted to counter this, so I created this page, and then that's how I got involved in the protest here. And it's kind of along the lines of why I did these rallies is, people have to make sure, we have to look at others as individuals with their own unique interests, views, beliefs, etc., and not just, go off of so-called, guilt by association.
It has been reported the Phoenix rally and surprising counter-protest remained relatively peaceful. No arrests were made, no guns were fired, no one was hurt. Let's have a look through the eyes of the camera of Samaya Daoud. The following video clips are from her own YouTube channel footage.
Murder! This religion is not a religion of peace. It's a religion of murder. It's a religion that kills.
Welcome! Welcome! Woo!
Testament to America! America! Where we can live with free!
First Amendment!
Amen.
Stop
Promoting the First Amendment! Stop promoting the First Amendment!
What do you call cutting off Christian and Iraqis' heads if not a hate crime? Why don't you stop the Islamic hate crimes all over the Middle East? And the hate crimes at Fort Hood, the hate crimes at the Boston Marathon, the hate crimes in Texas. You murder! This religion is not a religion of peace. It's a religion of murder. It's a religion that kills. Be Muhammad's name. Cursed be Muhammad's name. Muhammad is burning in hell. Burning in hell. When your husband throws some acid on your face for not being as pretty as his other wives, as his 3 other wives. Which number are you? Number 2? Number 3? Number 4? Islam is a religion that kills. It is a religion that murders. A religion that partners with Hitler. A religion that murders in cold blood. Murders innocent people. It's a religion of psychopaths. It's a religion of everything that America stands for. Oh my God.
How many times have you been raped? Are your kids? You have been raped with your kids? Really? You have been sleeping with your son?
Yeah, wave your flag. That's our flag. Muslims died in the World Trade Center, idiot. Yeah, Muslims died in the World Trade Center. Yeah. Where did you pick up all that hate? How do you even live with all that hate? How do you live with all that hate? Waving your flag. You're a disgrace.
The The Establishment Clause is the first pronouncement in our First Amendment to the United States Constitution that states that our government can make no law respecting an establishment of religion. This clause not only forbids the government from establishing an official religion or state church, but also prohibits government actions that unduly favor one religion over another. Our free exercise right does not mean that any religious practice is free to exercise, as acts can be prevented in practice by our state and federal laws. This right allows you to be part of any religion of your own individual choosing, or no religion at all. We can clearly see the great importance of these laws in a world where, at this time in human history, a state-enforced radical religious ideology has been the result of mass human suffering that continues to expand in our world today.
A Tucson protest event was planned and modeled after the protest at the Phoenix Islamic Cultural Center on May 29th. The Let Freedom Ring Freedom of Speech rally was organized by Dean Remington, who describes himself as a family man, a Christian, and a patriot. Dean's reasoning for heading the Tucson rally stemmed from his own personalized fear and hate concerning the absolute horrific nature of radicalized Islam's effect on our peaceful humanities, and who, despite feeling safe during his travels around the world, no longer feels that way. Remington, who was unable to attend the Phoenix rally, shares his thoughts on what he saw on social media and the news.
You didn't make it to the Phoenix protest that also had a counter-protest. Did you see video of that?
I did. I saw a lot what was put out there by the media and what John had on there too.
What did you think of that? I mean, I saw some video footage. I wasn't there myself.
Speaking from my perspective on how I would do that, I would not walk into that environment with shirts on that say fuck Islam. I mean, it's just the way I do business is totally different. I like John, I like Saad, I like everything that they're doing, but because I come from a military background, I have a law degree, and I'm very connected with local law enforcement here and everybody else. I don't want to put that on my shoulders as coming across as a person who's delivering a message or broadcasting in that capacity. That's not how I would do it. So, what he does and what in his mission statements and all that, that's just the way he is. But I don't believe in doing things like that. I believe in addressing the problems and not so much ramming it down their throat and marching upon a mosque. But like I did, I came to the mosque, I asked them for clear dialogue, and I actually canceled the rally in remembrance of our brothers that lost their lives in Chattanooga. There was no reason to go out there 3 days later and have a rally when we just lost military members. And a lot of stuff happens behind the lines too. You get a lot of chatter. You get a lot of people who are out there who fuel off of that. So now you have people out there that are at a rally for other intended purposes that you never even thought that they were there for. Like they're coming up with their own reasons why.
The sickos come out.
Right.
Well, it seemed like I saw a line of police, and on one end, people were yelling at the other side was yelling at the other. I mean, it was just...
What do you achieve? Absolutely nothing. Except
it just seemed like a venting.
Right. I'm not part of that. I don't see it like that. Whether you put together an organized rally that speaks the truths and peace, and you don't go against them, what you do is you bring things to light, and you actually say, these are some of the concerns of the people, for the people. Why isn't this being addressed?
It would be a great example to emulate, because it's not about going out there and beating our heads against the wall, being violent against anybody. It's about just going out there and saying, look, this is not right. This is not a great thing. Hey, say something, but speak up for your religion. I mean, if you cannot speak up, if you cannot take a stand, and you're sitting back and you say, it doesn't bother me, then you're condoning it. It's okay. I accept it.
You've kind of pacified the whole situation in a way that, you're not going to speak out against it in fear of hurting somebody's feelings or their culture or whatever. But on the other hand, you're sitting back and idly seeing things that are wrong, but not putting a word out because you don't want to be exposed.
I think it takes a rare man to stand up and say, wait a minute, all you guys are kind of not seeing it the right way. So it's about shining light on what you see as wrong.
Absolutely, but doing it in a tactful, personal way that doesn't show hatred and bigotry. Yes, we might have something swayed so far to the left or the right that people can misconstrue things.
Extremist one way or another.
And that's easy to do in any type of dynamic group. It's easy to say, oh, there's bad patriots over there, there's bad Muslims, or bad, it's easy to do that. But if you focus on that, on the mindset, what you're doing is actually detracting away from what you're trying to achieve. When you get sidetracked on all these little sidebars and all this stuff, you are detracting away from what your actual overall goal and mission is to bring things to light that are dynamic, dialogue conversations that people need to be having versus just sitting there throwing darts at each other. Because you can do that all day long. And I'm not about that.
Back on the Phoenix Mosque, you mentioned the kind of atmosphere, the guns and the neo-Nazis, or, people that came out there just to give people a hard time, basically. Where did you get the courage to go? First off, where did you get the courage to go into such a hostile environment like that?
It's a good question. I knew it was going to be, I knew it was very likely to be a very hostile environment. But, to me, my religious community is very important to me, and I didn't want anybody harmed. I didn't want anybody hurt. And, I've been an activist actually on other causes. And so, now this time it wasn't just me standing up for another community or for another cause. Now it's my own community that's under attack. So to me, I felt like it was an obligation for me to really attend. I felt just very much in my heart, this is my community being attacked now, I have to take a stand. And I knew there was a risk.
Was there any religious faith that allowed you to overcome the type of fears that one would have after seeing such a hostile environment to do the Tucson protests?
Absolutely. My faith is very, very strong. And my beliefs are very deeply held. I have no doubts in my mind, that over choosing Islam as my religion. And so because it's very much a part of me, just my spirituality and faith in general really helps me to overcome fear overall. So, I feel like by standing, when I know in my heart and in my mind that I'm standing up for truth and justice and doing the right thing in my heart, that fear just goes away. I'm still a human, don't get me wrong. I'm still a human. I get a little nervous. Well, I won't, some of those people in Phoenix, of course, they can make a person a little nervous.
Well, their goal is to make a person nervous, so, to overcome your own feelings is always a trial being human.
Exactly.
Sure. All the animosity and the yelling and the hate, there was no real violence or no real crime, no real arrests or anything. That whole thing ended up surprisingly being peaceful.
I'm sure most people felt like I did, that that protest had the potential of anything could happen. There had been threats posted online, and nobody knew ahead of time. It could have gotten very ugly, and I was praying that it wouldn't, and I'm sure a lot of us were. And
glad your prayers were answered.
Yeah, it turns out that even though there was a lot of that animosity and so forth, I have to say, if the fact that everybody walked away, nobody got hurt, there were no arrests. That's definitely a good thing. a couple of things actually is it did bring a lot of diverse groups of people together to stand up, in solidarity with the mosque and the Muslim community. And at the same time, what was interesting was some of the people on the other side, the ones protesting against Islam and the mosque and so forth, some of the people on that side actually had decided to come over to our side and have a dialogue. And actually, in one case, I remember there were a couple of people kind of yelling back and forth across the police line. Well, you couldn't really hear each other that well, so they ended up I think they came over to our side. And it actually happened where even some of them had gone inside the mosque and I guess, watched how we pray and so forth. And some of them, they actually changed their mind. They're like, well, you know what? These people aren't so scary, after all. They're not like what we hear on the news every day. So there were definitely a lot of positives that came out of it.
Yeah, well, I think that's very vitally important. If you have a perception of something that's from second or third or fourth hand information,
exactly.
You need to put aside your fears and go to the source.
Exactly.
And check it out for yourself, because more times than not, I've done that and found out I was completely wrong.
Exactly. And that's why dialogue is so important too, is, when people are disconnected from one another, everything's at a distance, then it's easier to have those prejudices and fears seep in. But when you actually get to know people and you get to, listen to different points of view and experience different things, it totally changes how people interact with one another and how they view things, I think. The funny thing is when you have people in person, it's different than when it's online.
Yeah.
There's something about the internet when there's like this sense of security where people can be very nasty on the internet, but in person they're completely fine.
Yeah.
People will be screaming and yelling and swearing and saying all this stuff on the internet, but yet if they meet that person in the store, it's like, how's the weather?
I've seen that.
The sad thing is with war and conflict, there's a tendency to dehumanize the other side. You look at the other side and treat them all as the same, that they're totally different than you, that they're not really people, they're just evil, they're just bad. But in the reality, if you look at the whole planet, you have different cultures, different religions, different races. But at the same time, everybody bleeds the same. And you know what? Most people want to survive. Most people want to raise their families, and their children, in safety. Most people want to have an enjoyable life. Most people want to find meaning in life and things like that. And along those lines, like what you said is, I think that's happened all throughout history too with war and conflict is, even though two sides are sent to fight each other, a lot of times when they actually get to know each other, things change.
As humans, we tend to associate people, like we say, good or bad. This person is all good, this person is all bad, but the reality of it is we're all good and bad in our own individual bodies. So it's
easier. I hate to say this, but I think part of this is there's anti-intellectualism in society, in all societies really, that's unhealthy. And when people, it's more convenient for people to look at things in black and white. Good guys and bad guys. That's how like children think with like cartoons. It's like, well, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. Unfortunately, a lot of adults think the same way because it doesn't require intellectual thought. It doesn't require critical thinking. It doesn't require analysis. When you can sit down and have an open dialogue and learn from each other, usually you can have some kind of a resolution. Maybe not everybody's 100% happy, but you make it work. And that's what I want.
Well, I think that makes you a minority in the world. To confront difficult situations, scary situations, or, difficult conversations.
It is quite difficult as individuals not to associate a bad minority as speaking for the entire group. 2 months after the Freedom of Speech rally in Phoenix, 3 members of John Ritzheimer's security detail for the rally, Paris Frazier, Eric Foster, and Robert Deadrage, was caught in an FBI sting operation. These men offered to kill for money, as well as being caught stealing cocaine and cash from someone assuming to be a cartel member. These men were a part of a group called Arizona Special Operations Group, also known as Arizona Militia, that often publicized on social media. There is no indication Ritzheimer had anything to do with the action of these three men. Each of these men have pleaded not guilty to the charges of conspiring to possess with the intent to distribute more than 5 kilograms of cocaine. The case was filed on July 23rd. Dean Remington was the first to tell me about these men he described as bad patriots.
I didn't know if you had heard. Have you heard about the Dirty Three up in Phoenix that just got? Let me tell you a little something about the Patriot movement. We got a lot of good people in there, and a lot of people that are solid in what they do, and then we got a few bad apples out there. And these three guys, for years, they've been being watched as a rip crew, and they publicly, openly acknowledged that they were, chasing down people with loads. They were looking for loads, they were looking for money, going down south, and they got basically a UCE who was an undercover operative that was posing as crooked border patrol with cartel, feeding them all this information and dangling the carrot. They took it not once, they took it not twice, they took it a half a dozen times, and they just kept taking it. And they've put a black mark, literally from the 3% United Patriots and all the Patriot movements in Arizona because of what they did. They had I have the police report and actually I have the indictment, the court documents, 15 pages, and they went on a high-speed chase. They took money, they took cocaine that was planted, and they just kept going until it came to.
And so they're associated with the Patriots.
They were not per se associated with any type of Patriot movement. They just embedded themselves in different areas to make it look like they were a team. Like if one
show up to group
to different
events or different things or whatever. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never seen it. But from what I understand, they just were not likable people that most people didn't really care for them in that sense. They were overbearing, extremely pushy.
Well, it seems like when you get a group that has a good ideology and it starts to build, it always seems to get co-opted by evil.
Well, it's the same thing. You will find the same rate of corruption,
and you can find that in religion and politics,
police, military.
We can find it in
any group. You will find that.
If your core values are out there to assist all local law enforcement, DHS, Border Patrol, whether you're on the border, you're in your local city, you're doing stuff in any capacity as a patriot, you need to have that respect, that responsibility, and reliability. Because if you don't have that, you've lost the core nucleus.
The media likes to focus on the extremists because, shock value sells. And the thing about a protest, I was at an anti-police brutality march, and it ended up on the media, and, they were talking about how the protesters were violent, and they were saying that the protesters were throwing things at the police and things like that. I actually never saw one person throw anything. Well, it turns out there was a video out there where it did show one person throw a flag. But you see, rather than looking at the 50 people who are peaceful, they're going to focus on the one person that does that and make it out like everybody's violent. And it's the same thing and unfortunately it happens with Muslims, that one, it's terrible that, one person commits a heinous act of violence. And you know what? It doesn't matter if 1,000 of us are at a homeless shelter feeding the poor. A lot of our side that was standing in solidarity with the mosque didn't make the headlines. What made the headlines was the guy that had the t-shirt that had the SS symbol and it said I don't know what it said, but it had the Nazi symbol. That's what was the headline.
The extremists.
Exactly. It's not just media. I think that's a lot of the politics too, where people can actually agree on 90% of things, but it's the 10% that people are fighting about.
Yeah, I find people too often get caught in a game of party politics instead of identifying problems and coming up with reasonable solutions.
And that's my approach to politics. Like, I'm just not into like politicians or any of this stuff. I'm into issues. You know, what is the problem? We need to identify the problem and then work towards a solution. That can involve different groups of people. It can involve just regular grassroots movements. It can involve leaders. I mean, it can involve both. It just depends.
Information in the virtual world, just like information in the real world, it is up to you to take all available resources and use logic, reason, as well as comprehensive critical thinking to form your own opinion of what seems reasonable to you as an individual. A counter-protest called Stand Up Against Hate was organized by Samaya Daoud. On July 8th, a Facebook event page was also created. What took place after these event pages were created was basically a continuation of the dual protests at the Phoenix Mosque, but carried out in a virtual form. Contributors from both pages continued to post actively onto their respective event pages.
What did you think about the negative reaction? The basically, you know, you guys were called bigots.
The stigma of everything.
Bigots,
right?
meaning saying
uneducated.
there's someone that does evil that's an Islamic terrorist, and they're all Islamic terrorists. Well, how do you respond to that kind of mentality? It seemed to cultivate.
I know what my convictions are, and I know I follow the letter of the law in anything I do, and I'll tell any federal agent, any state agent, any city agent exactly that a patriot is not out there on the front line seeing what they can tear down. They're seeing what they can bring together to cultivate America as a whole. We've been torn apart since the 20s. If you think about it, the mindset of the progressive shift to tear the core competency of America apart has been happening for a long time.
If there was a group that you were organizing, wouldn't you, to not be hypocritical in it, no disrespect, wouldn't you be a little more active and speaking out on the hate that was portrayed on the group website on Facebook? The hate and putting all these people in one group as being terrorists.
Well, it's not so much stereotyping Muslims per se, all Muslims and grouping in one category, but if you boil it down to the simple nucleus, that if you have a diverse culture as America, and then you have a community such as the Muslims and Islam, and you are taking those people and pinning them against, whether you're doing it on either side, it's wrong. It's dead wrong. You can't say all patriots are militia and all patriots want to take down the blacks, the Muslims, and all that, because that's not true. And you can't say that all Muslims are out to kill Americans and to do, grave danger to the United States and all that. You can't say that. So what you have to do is...
Well, you shouldn't. You should. You can, but you should.
Say it, but what you're doing is you're grouping yourself into...
Because it's freedom of speech, I guess. But why? But I guess what I'm getting at is, why didn't I see you speaking out against that kind of? Because it seemed like that kind of mentality of grouping all the Muslims, it was prompted.
It is touched if you take the time to read through it. So, see, here's the problem. It's just like anything. They come back at you like, oh, you're not doing enough.
Oh, and I'm definitely not doing that.
And I'm going to stay along with what John is saying is I'm going to do what is strategically, tactically, and makes the most sense within the constitutional law as an American, within the confines of what my pay grade and what I can control. I can't control what happens on the border, I can't control what happens in the mosque, but I can be an ambassador or spokesperson against things that I see are wrong.
Separation of church and state is a very important concept, as it prohibits the government from interfering with the people's religious affairs. But at the same time, it also restrains the people for turning our government into religious law. Every generation is confronted with the threat to freedom and the basic human rights. To preserve freedom, Muslims and non-Muslims must come together to defeat the threat of our time. Some of the less positive pursuits of man, such as human slaughter, torture, misery, and anguish within terrorist organizations, is something that seems to be consistent throughout human history. In most recent history, a radical ideology of Islamism, also known as political Islam, threatens many around the world as it utilizes certain Muslim doctrines and beliefs as the foundation of a political structure that is radical and violent to its people. Political Islam is concerned with controlling practically every aspect of the life of the individual, to the point of even killing to achieve this control. Totalitarian in nature, this is one of the biggest threats in the world that we live in today. The expansionist effort of political Islam is the type of tyranny that is completely contrary to the ideas of a free society and a free-thinking people. These are the key factors to what motivated Dean Remington in organizing the Tucson Freedom of Speech rally and creating a Facebook event page to bring the uncomfortable truth to some light and acknowledgement. The Let Freedom Ring Freedom of Speech event page was stating that Islam, as well as local Islamic centers, will only promote a totalitarian ideology as well as the type of terrible terrorism seen in the Middle East. While the Stand Up Against Hate page questioned why someone who strongly cares about American values and a deep respect for our Bill of Rights would be using his freedom of speech to prevent others from practicing their own freedom of religion. Dean provided me a packet of information with his concerns about political Islam infiltrating our cherished American values.
So yeah, hopefully that information there, and a lot of that, I tried to present that in a nutshell. I tried to present that to the Board of Trustees at the ICT. And they said that they never heard of the project or the Holy Land Foundation trials. They never heard of any ties to radical Islam to the Islamic Center Tucson, and that's not the truth. The truth is a lot have come out of Phoenix and a lot have come out of Tucson. That during that whole time, that the 90s and pre 9/11 and post 9/11. There was a lot of people that came out of those areas that were tied to Hamas and Al-Qaeda and stuff like that.
Well, I'm sure there's probably a lot of interconnection. Do you think the majority of it?
I highly doubt the majority. I think you're talking a handful of people. But if they're found, if they're found, like the new imam, he has come. He's only been here less than a year, and he has come from Egypt along with Dr. Hassan. He's another one that came years ago out of Iraq. So Dr. Hassan has been here for a while, and he's one of the Board of Trustees. So I tried to work with them on bringing them the information, looking it over, as a scholarly type review, and they really didn't want anything to do with it.
I did read the test, but it was kind of my impression they just didn't want to meet that specific day. Did they decline other days?
They declined everything. They said that it wasn't going to be commensurate with the way they're bored, and they did. What they did is it looked good up front, and then when it came down to the time to meet and everything, there was always excuses made why not to meet or why they needed permission to do that. So I said, I'm open. You can get a hold of me anytime. And I gave them several opportunities. We did meet one time in the ICT with the assistant TPD chief and the captain in charge of Homeland Security. We met with a small group of board, and that's when I presented a lot of the things. And they said they'd never heard about them. They didn't realize that any of this stuff was happening within their mosque, and they looked at it in a different light.
Denial.
So a lot of it was denial because I presented the names, and I even presented sermons that in 2000 to 2003 that the ICT imam had specifically given these sermons out to the people, and they were radical sermons. They were on paper and radical. So, and one of the comments was, well, that's why he's not here right now. The one female from the board, I can't remember her name, Aisha or whatever her name was, she said that, well, that's because he's not here anymore. I said, well, that's great. I said, but there's still people out there who believe in those followings. If you presented a sermon in that capacity that's, you know, hatred to America, hatred to Israel, you have a problem. That was another thing. I asked the board of trustees before I met with the imam, because I never did meet with Khalid, Mr. Khalid, the imam there. I asked him if he would be willing to go, you know, with the media and denounce radical Islam, you know, denounce the things that we have collectively, because Tucson is such a small city, and if the Muslim population was on board with everybody else's mindset, would he as a leader be willing to do that? And they said that right at this point in time they couldn't, you know, make that determination.
Do you think if he did denounce it, could it put himself in danger?
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
That's what I suggested.
yeah. I mean, anybody could be put in. You know, you look at what Pamela Geller did in Texas, and had it been another couple minutes and somebody missed a mark, there would have been a whole lot of dead people versus one chalk line of one radical. There could have been 100 chalk lines of dead, you know, people doing their
So I think it would be kind of hard, especially being in a Muslim community, to speak out against the violence, even though maybe you're against it personally.
But it's the right thing to do regardless. The same thing we would speak out as Americans. We would speak out amongst violence within our own. I mean, I'm totally in agreement that we as Americans have to self-police just like the Muslims have to self-police. We all internally have to say, well, if we got a guy over here who's an American, he's talking out about the government all the time, he's acting radical on stuff, that's the kind of person you want to pull in and put under the microscope just to see what their convictions are and what their reasoning is. Because if they have faulty logic, they're going to go out and do something faulty in the community.
Or even make the whole group look stupid.
And that's what they do. It only takes one. It only takes one.
So it's not so much that you have a problem with them practicing their religion peacefully.
I have no problem whatsoever. I mean,
Everybody's got to have religions for them.
Sure.
It's the glue of life.
You respect the freedom of religion, no matter even if it is a Muslim religion. You just want to speak out against the violence that is used.
And you become familiar with the project and actually the settlement from the 90s to present day of how North America was supposed to be settled by Islam. When you read some of the dialogue that's in there and the core competencies of what they're using, it all completely says envelop and encapsulate a whole civilization as your religion, as your rooted, where you can plant your trees, and that's the whole premise of it. Regardless of what anybody else thinks, whether you're Jewish at your synagogue, whether you're Catholic at your churches, they don't care about that. They are planting.
And you can see examples of the trees coming to fruition and growing in other countries.
Well, in other countries, in our country, though, we do have the freedom of religion with the establishment clause. With the establishment, meaning that no religion can be a state-established religion.
Correct. If you speak out against anything other than Islam, it doesn't have to be radical. It just has to be going against the Quran itself. If you go outside that, you're blasphemous, and you will be stoned to death. You will be, you know.
Well, obviously, being stoned isn't going to. It is against our laws.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, true. That will not happen
In the United States.
but it could happen in the future. Once you establish Sharia law in any form of session, if you're not standing there watching it, who's to say it's not going to happen?
Well, checks and balances, that could happen with anything. Right.
What if you're,
You know, it's also, I think, it's an abuse of religion. It is a distortion of perversion.
I think that it downgrades the females of the culture,
Very much.
downgrades the children, and they're warped. I mean, if you look at the way that they go about teaching them growing up in the other countries, it's work. If you look at what they're teaching here, it's still work.
I mean, I stay in close contact with Dr. Goldberg, who's out up in Phoenix, and Gary from the Roundtable, and both those gentlemen have provided me more than enough information proving that there is a huge attack on the Jewish and the American culture with radicalism. For example, what goes on in Ireland with the Sinn Féin. If you take that concept, there's no reason.
What do you mean in Ireland? The Sinn Féin?
With the IRA.
IRA?
Okay, the English and the Irish.
You mean the Protestants?
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah.
You could have that here very easily. In fact, some of the same facets and some of the same models that happen in IRA are happening in other places in Europe and are happening here in the United States just by culturally ripping people apart with their religion. As soon as you rip somebody's religion apart and you take their culture and you flip it upside down, you have animosity. You've created a serious problem. Yes.
It's great saying.
Patriots.
And that's wrong.
Well, I think the whole thing kind of started in Syria, from what I understand. Emperor Constantine said, "I'm a Christian now." He goes into Syria, which is a major trading port, and says, "You're all Christians now."
Right.
And thus started the holy war that's been going on ever
You're
since.
force feeding something on an entire race, culture, religion. You're ramming it down their throat. When like take for instance the Church of Latter-day Saints or the Kingdom Hall, the Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't mind.
The Mormons are the Jehovah's Witnesses.
I don't mind if they come and knock on my door. I'm going to tell them that I'm a Christian with family Christian faith-based values, and this is my conviction. They're not going to convert me, but in a way, they're not going to ram it down my throat either. We're going to come to a happy medium and talk about our religion, our God, and all that, and then go our separate ways. You can't do that with Islam. You can't pick and choose. Like today, I'm going to be a sinner. Tomorrow, I'm not. You can't do that. As soon as you pick and choose, you blaspheme. You're blasphemous to Islam, and you are not following to the letter of the law, to the Quran. Basically, Islam is the ideology wrapped. It's a full culture wrapped in a religion, where other cultures aren't like that. Like obviously we have people that go to Baptist churches, Catholic churches. When they leave, they might leave and go get a drink after church or something like that. You can't do that in the Islamic culture. You can't say, I've just left the mosque and now I'm going to commit sins. You can do that, but you're against Islam as the core religion, and you're blasphemous against it. So,
well, also Islam's run in the state. It's a theocracy. It's run by the state. It's a state-run religion.
Right. So you have all you basically have your laws, your financials, and all the stuff wrapped all into that. If you actually read that packet, it kind of breaks it down into
utopia.
Right.
Either they're full bore against it, or how do you find a middle ground? And here's my thing: I have no problem against Islam. I have friends who are Islamic. They've just been that way. I've known them for 40 years. What do you want me to say? They go to the mosque, but they've never spit any hate in my face. At all.
They practice peacefully.
They've never said anything for us.
No, they've never said anything derogatory.
Right.
Ever. Now, and I've been overseas, and I've been to places, and I've experienced a religious mosque before, and I've never had a problem there either. But that's 40 years ago. Now, it's a whole different ballgame out there for some reason, As a group, if you're a Muslim, you have to make the choice of, oh God, we're going to have to worry about it. Rules come along, blowing us up, and we start talking, hey, be nice, There's nothing wrong with being nice. Everybody should be nice, But, the Catholics and the Crusades, shit, that was in the 1100s. Don't even try to bring that up. The whole point is, what's going on right now? Nobody condemns it in the Islamic religion. It just exacerbates the problem. It's complacency. You want to be complacent? I can't say anything bad about them because, look, I'm a bum. Yes, that's probably true. But when you had some huevos and you say, no, it's wrong.
On July 18th, the day before the announced cancellation of the event, veteran patriot Dean Remington did an interview on Global Freedom Radio to promote the Freedom of Speech protest rally. At the very end of the interview, Dean was asked, what are some of your takeaways that you would like to make sure our audience has? Mr. Remington says, as Americans and as patriots defending our Constitution, we should make sure that the law of the land is constitutional law, welcoming all religions and cultures of people and to be tolerant. Not to ignore the dangers of political Islam and the possibility of radicalization within these mosques. Dean is asking that our immediate government needs to do a better job at addressing his concerns. The full interview can be found on Global Freedom Radio's YouTube page. The very next day following the interview, a lone wolf gunman shot and killed 4 Marines during 2 attacks at military facilities in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Fearing that in light of this national news, there might be possible danger to all protesters involved, Dean Remington posted on his event page and issued a proper press release of the cancellation of the protest rally. Remington was personally asked by the Islamic Center of Tucson worship leader to personally present the information of the past members of the ITC being tied to terrorism and concerning the Holy Land Foundation trials. Remington then met with Tucson police and key leadership and board members at the ITC to review his concerns. The resolve of this meeting, as Remington explains, was also one of the reasons behind the immediate cancellation.
What I know of Islam in other countries around the world, where Islam takes part in the government, where it helps create more of a totalitarian or a controlled environment, where they use religious law to force will on people, and sometimes it can be perverted. But how do you feel about our Constitution in this country and how it fits in with Islam?
Well, that's a good question. That's a big one.
Yeah, I try.
I mean, obviously, well, it's interesting because, Islam is actually not just a religion, it's a complete way of life. So Islam as a whole does actually structure how entire countries run.
So when you say it's a way of life, do you think it's a chosen way of life, or that it should, like in other countries, be forced as a way of life?
Well, it's not supposed to be forced, actually. So I know, it isn't supposed to be something that's by force.
Do you think that it's important for the Islamic Center to promote obeying the law of the land, whatever land they're in?
Well, yes, I do. Again, you don't want conflict if you can help it. Sometimes conflict is inevitable. I mean, and this is, again, going back to why would you protest in the first place? I mean, if there's an injustice, then you need to speak up and you need to stand up for it. Now, here's where I can be a little controversial. I do believe civil disobedience does have its place, and historically, that's been proven with Martin Luther King Jr., with Mahatma Gandhi. There are times where breaking the law is justified. Like if there is an injustice, if a law itself is unjust, you kind of have this thing where laws and morals don't always remain parallel. In certain circumstances, yes, I mean, this even goes with military in a war. There are cases where soldiers should disobey their commanding officers because what they're commanding is morally wrong.
Or against their oath to the Constitution.
Exactly. There's and that's another point too. Like you can have a federal or state or local law that contradicts the Constitution. And in that case, it's actually an obligation for a police officer to actually not enforce that law and default to the Constitution.
Such as disarming people when the Constitution says you should. Okay.
Absolutely. So, in that case, I'm not trying to, but I know what you're saying is, am I for being destructive? No. I'm not. No. Again, I have no criminal record. It's not that I'm trying to break laws, but I do argue there are certain... To give you an example, like Rosa Parks was supposed to move to the back of the bus because of segregation. She refused. She sat at the front of the bus. They arrested her.
Civil disobedience.
Most people will say that it was good that she broke the law. likewise, sometimes at protests, and I've been to protests this way, people will actually sit down in an intersection, and they're like, we're going to have a moment of silence, and we're going to sit down. The traffic's not going to be very happy. It does kind of stall people for a few minutes. And the police will, technically they can arrest you for that, because you're obstructing the flow of it's not like just a traffic violation. You're intentionally blocking a roadway. So, there is a place for some of this stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm saying just go around breaking laws.
Actually, you're saying abide by the laws, abide by the Constitution, abide by the laws of the land, and challenge the ones that are
exactly,
immoral.
and question authority. Basically, the central goal is justice. So you should always take the best possible. This is and I believe this is what Islam says on this as well, is you should always take the best path towards obtaining justice, towards righting a wrong. You should always take the best path. There's so many different ways you can do things, but you want to resolve conflicts. You want to put it this way, you try to take if you have a path with a lot of resistance and a path of least resistance, if they're both going to get you to the same goal, take the path of least resistance. Only take the tougher path if that's your only option. You know what I'm saying?
Right, you want to refine and come up with the best possible solution, even if it might be a difficult path.
And to answer also your question, about this country, I think.
How does the Constitution fit in with?
I feel like, I feel like here in America, there's really a strong. Most people, I feel, there's a strong American value of respecting and having multiculturalism. Respecting a diversity of opinions, respecting different points of view, respecting the right for people to more or less, pursuit of happiness, you get to kind of carve out how you want to live your life, and things of that. And so I feel like, when the Constitution is implemented, properly, and it's not...
When it's actually where our leaders follow it.
Exactly. When it's actually followed, it is supposed to allow everybody to practice whatever religion they want. I can be a Muslim. You can be whatever religion you want. People are supposed to be able to have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. And along those lines too, I know that the people that had the anti-Islam protests in both Phoenix and Tucson, they had talked about how it was a freedom of speech rally. My view on that is, constitutionally, yes, they do have the freedom of speech. So they do, again, it's the same thing, just as I have the right to assemble, to stand up against hate, they do have the right to assemble and, draw offensive cartoons or yell offensive things. My take kind of is, I'm not saying they shouldn't have the freedom of speech to do that. And I don't think they should say that I don't have the freedom of speech to do what I'm doing. But there is another level of, I do feel like just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. It's just one of those things. It's easy to say something, harder to do it. The religion, and this is every religion, I'm sure just about, you're supposed to treat your neighbor well.
Is that something that's preached in Islam?
Absolutely. But guess what? Because people are people, it's easy. I can get up on a microphone and say, Islam says, treat your neighbor with kindness. But I'm going to be tested on that, just like anybody else. And if I see a neighbor, drop the groceries, or maybe the neighbor's annoying me somehow and has the music too loud. Now I'm being tested. Am I actually going to follow through with what I preached? Some people do and some people don't. There may be people that don't help their neighbor pick up the groceries. There may be a person that yells at their neighbor. So again, it's easy to say something, harder to do it.
Well, same thing in Christianity. Yep. It's love thy neighbor. That isn't your immediate neighbor, that's everybody. Love thy neighbor.
Samaya Dao has been very supportive in the change in dialogue, stating that Dean is true to his word and has canceled his protest. Assuming that people may not get the press release or show up anyway to harass the ICT mosque, she continued to host an anti-hate and anti-violent protest near the southwest corner of Speedway Boulevard and Euclid.
Most notable is our right to free speech, as this allows us to voice our ideas, thoughts, and criticisms in order to achieve a more perfect union. When critical thinking and constructive or even destructive criticism is denied or censored, we set ourselves up to completely lose the opportunity of ensuring a better tomorrow for all. Criticism is a most useful tool that allows us to question the actions of authority and the actions of each other to better deal with our own hypocrisies, collectively and individually. This right to criticize alone can help us also to come together. When practiced with responsibility and values, the conclusions can lead us to a better place collectively. If you have something that needs to be said, be sure to practice your individual right to free speech without fear of recourse.
Well, this one, it actually says, on one side it says, end hate speech, end hate crimes.
Okay.
And the other side it says, Muslim lives matter. These actually were hashtags that were generated in February. There was, I don't know if you heard the Chapel Hill shooting. There were 3 young Muslim college students. It was a very tragic situation. And, you know, many of us believe it was a hate crime. The police and the media have continued to say it was a parking dispute. But basically what it was this man, he did have issues with all his neighbors. But
He hated everybody.
Yeah, in terms of things like parking and neighborly squabbles, I mean, he did have issues with, I think, pretty much everybody. But what happened was this young Muslim man named Dia Barakat, who was living there, he got married to his wife, Yusor Abu Salhaj. You know, he was 21 years old. She was, he was, I think, 23 and she was 21. Well, when she moved into his house, she wore a headscarf, a hijab. And then, you know, so she and other family members like her sister Razan and others started coming over. And this moment he started seeing, you know, the women with their headscarves, with the hijabs, he started getting increasingly more aggressive towards those particular neighbors. And one day he walked right in the house and put a bullet in all 3 of their heads and killed them all. The youngest one, Razan, was 19 years old. And all 3 were college students. I mean, they had their whole life going for them.
Wow.
So anyway, what happened was, you know, when the news broke on this, there was almost no mainstream media coverage, which was very disturbing because normally anytime 3 college students are found dead, you know, shot in the head, I mean, that's almost always instant breaking national news. I mean, any shooting of college students is immediate news.
Or it should be.
Usually, in my experience.
Yeah, should be.
So it was like 24 hours went by and there was almost nothing. So then we started having candlelight vigils and protests and things like that where we had signs and these hashtags came out, and so that's what my sign was based off of.
Oh, so even though you want to end hate speech, you don't literally want to end it. In other words, you don't want to put a ban on hate speech, but you want to at least confront the hate speech.
Exactly, and that's what I mean when I say the word end. It goes back to, you have freedom, but you also have morals and ethics. So, you know, you have I'm not saying that you should not have a legal constitutional right to say whatever you want. And you do have that right, and you should have that right here. My argument is that just because you can say or do something doesn't mean you should. So it's like you do have freedom, but you also have ethics, and we have to remember we should use our freedoms here for the good, not use our freedoms for the bad.
Right. Make a positive impact in the world instead of
exactly. In the news, when there's Muslims who have committed acts of violence, you know, unfortunately there's a lot of news about, you know, Islamic extremists, you know, terrorist attacks and so forth. And it's very tragic that people give, you know, the Islam religion such a bad name. You know, Islamically, we have the right to self-defense, you know, but does that mean to go around just attacking people because you don't agree with them? Absolutely not.
That's not defense, that's offense.
Absolutely. And where I was going with it is, when you have extremists, basically they're taking a path of violence to force their views on other people. And that's wrong. It's wrong what they're doing. This is one of those topics, like, and it's funny, like, everybody always seems to want Muslims to talk about, like, what's going on in the Middle East and stuff, but it's so complex, and it's all this, I'm not there, and you have all these theories, like maybe the U.S. foreign policy helped to create ISIS, or maybe ISIS in the first place. Maybe it's the whole thing is like a false flag. Maybe they are just Islamic extremists.
Or maybe it's a combination of all
Maybe
those
it's a
things.
combination of all these things. The problem is it's like, what's tricky is when you're not there and you're here, you're only getting it secondhand.
Or third
hand. And actually what happens is, I do know, like in Syria and Iraq, there's about a dozen or more different groups fighting. And the media happens to focus on one right now, but actually there's atrocities being committed. I mean, the Assad regime is horrible, and then you have all these different groups, and you have all these different groups, and you know what? You could actually really debate who is worse than who. I mean, it's all pretty ugly. And the sad reality is, I'm sure it's true that the majority of people who are suffering and losing their lives are 100% innocent, and it's tragic. It really is.
And that's the side that we should always be on. Is the side
Yeah.
not the side of killers.
I agree. Taking the path of least resistance, let's say I have the right to defend myself. I have the right to actually use physical violence within the law to defend myself. But just because I can do that doesn't mean I should go intentionally and provoke a problem and incite trouble. Why should I intentionally go? Let's say, why should I intentionally go to a certain situation and provoke a problem when it's not necessary? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like, and with a self-defense thing, if I actually have had taken classes on this. If you can avoid a problem as much as possible, do so. But if you must deal with it, you do it. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but
it's the difference between being backed up in the corner and having to defend yourself, or running towards the problem and creating a problem.
Exactly, and I'll give you an example like on that. Since John Ritzheimer and Dean Remington, since they were going to bring potentially armed people to the mosques, since they were going, since they had particularly in the case of the Phoenix protest,
they were bringing people with a hateful attitude
to the doors of the mosque. So in a case, exactly, with weapons. So in a case like that, absolutely, I'm going to be there to defend the mosque, to speak out against hate. They're bringing it to our doors. But does that mean I'm going to go out of my way now and try to find where these people are at? Am I going to try to find where their meetings are? Am I going to try to show up to their places they hang out? No.
The Tucson protest was open to all that wanted to stand up against hate. One of the more predominantly visual groups was a network of local anarchists who participated in an anti-colonial anarchist black bloc. Anti-colonial anarchists are anti-racist and have a strong commitment to combating white supremacy as well as police brutality. They often speak out against ongoing history of colonization of capitalist nations, with the ideas of curtailing the power of imperialistic conquests at home and abroad. Historic colonization refers to European settlements, such as the start of the colonization of the Americas. This group believes that America currently subjugates and tramples the people of many other countries, including its own.
Many countries around our world recognize our rights of freedom of assembly and to petition government for redress of grievances. Our right to petition is the right to make a complaint to or seek the assistance of one's government, without the fear of punishment or reprisals as a means of protecting public participation in government, and comes with very little constraint. Concerning our right to assemble, however, there are often constraints concerning time and place regulations and requirements to obtain a permit. In the case of the Tucson protest, neither regulations were enforced with much coordination by local police was made to ensure public safety to honor this most valuable right of group expression of the people.
The anti-colonial Black Bloc were aware of large numbers of police and surveillance infrastructure, as well as the possibility of armed individuals showing up despite the rally's cancellation. With the possibility of conflict from police provocation or with rally participants, they prepared to take on a defensive role for the upcoming protest. In the name of anonymity, it is encouraged to protest in a fashion called Black Bloc, an organized dress code of all black covering your face. This makes it difficult to distinguish between participants as it can conceal identities as well as hinder criminal prosecution. It is also used to protect their faces and eyes from items such as pepper spray, which law enforcement often uses to stun. This tactic allows the group to appear as one large unified mass and promote solidarity. It has been stated, our masks are not used to conceal our identity, but to reveal it.
Like a lot of people, because I've worked with anarchists a lot, on anti-police anti-police brutality rallies and stuff, a lot of people actually think I'm an anarchist and I'm actually not. But what I am is I'm very critical of authority. Leaders have to be held accountable. If I'm a leader, I have to be held accountable. And that, so I'm very, when we talk about politicians and politics, it's like, for me to say that I like a leader, the leader has to be really good. I'm very critical of authority. And I think we should be. I think everybody has to, because you can't, if you have people saying that we're going to represent your cause or we're going to represent your community, they have to be held to very high standards.
Checks and balance.
Absolutely. We can't just say do whatever you want, at your benefit and the expense of everybody else. It doesn't work that way.
You had some flack where people had given you the logical fallacy, basically, of guilt by association, since they came in to help support, to speak out against hate and violence against people. How did that, what happened to affect that kind of judgment upon you?
Are you talking about the one here in Tucson where the anarchist group showed up?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Anti-Colonial Anarchist Black Bloc is what they were called.
Thank you, yes.
It's interesting, when it comes to different activist groups coming together to stand up for a cause, not everybody has the same politics, but they're obviously coming together because they're somewhat in agreement on certain things. And I did hear some of these logical fallacies, as you put it, and what I tried to do was I didn't want divide and conquer tactics at the counter protest. Anybody who showed up that generally came with a message to say, hey, we're against Islamophobia, we're against racism, we're against bigotry. I wanted to make sure that everybody was included. It didn't matter, if there was a difference in politics. You can have anarchists, you can have communists, you can have, very conservative capitalists, but anybody that's there, standing up against hate is somebody I wanted to include. Yeah, I didn't really want to try to create separations where it's like, oh, well, you're with this group here and we're with this group here. It's better to work together if you can.
Right.
Somebody could say, well, Hitler was a vegetarian, but you wouldn't say that all vegetarians are Nazis. And likewise, these anti-Islam protests, the one in Phoenix by Ritzheimer, as well as, or John Ritzheimer, as well as the one here, here in Tucson by Dean Remington, both of them actually had cited, both of them had referenced that each of these mosques, had terror suspects linked, or some of them may have been actually convicted, I don't know, but that they had terrorists linked to the, to the mosques. That's what they were saying. But at the same time, you can't say that means that all the Muslims that go to that mosque think like they do or support what they do.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing can be said also with the other side on when John Ritzheimer had the anti-Islam rally in Phoenix was, each side actually wants to lump the whole, each side wants to look at the other side and lump them all together. So there's kind of this bias where we all want our side to be given, we're all individuals and so forth, but we like to lump the other side all as one group. And you know what? People are people. You can't do that. Just as not all Muslims are the same, the people on the other side, they weren't all neo-Nazis. They actually weren't all bigots, because again, a number of them, had preconceived notions about Islam. They didn't really have a full understanding of who Muslims are, what the mosques are about. But once they actually had some dialogue with us, you found out there were people that, they actually came to our side again. So, and there were some people that walked away from it like, they're like, well, they don't like Islam, and they have the right to, they don't have to like Islam. But again, not everybody on that side was hostile. There was healthy dialogue, just as there was really scary stuff. So you have a mix. Sometimes like with the anarchist Black Bloc, they'll dress all in black. And they'll have black flags because the black flag, the plain black flag, is a symbol of anarchism, and it's sometimes they'll have the red A on it. But again, with this whole thing of image and stuff, people see people dressed like that and with flags, they're like, oh my gosh, they think they think that it's like an Islamic extremist group or
I
something, and it's not.
Pirates. That's what I thought.
Well, it's the same thing too. Like people that don't know me that well, if they see my social media and stuff. Well, this is what's funny, because I take videos of the marches, as you know, and some of the anti-police brutality ones can actually get pretty. I mean, there are people that use foul language on it. But see, what people don't understand is I'm wearing different hats, so to speak, because I'm standing with a sign, saying like stop police brutality and like end racial profiling, but I'm also videotaping. So if I'm videotaping, then that's gonna pick up other people's stuff. But that doesn't mean that I'm saying the things they're saying.
Right.
So people can misconstrue it. Now, if there's another video out there that shows me, then obviously it's different. But see, people kind of confuse the two, that they think because I'm at the protest and I have a video of it that, they don't separate that, everybody's an individual here.
Right. And so basically you're saying your actions speak for yourself.
Exactly.
The actions of others that's on them.
We want to do nothing more but support other people from other countries who have came over here and immigrated over here for a better life. And it sucks. It sucks that they feel like they can't come out here. But just know that we support them in whatever decision that they choose. Very simple. Do unto you what you would want done to others, It's sad to say that stuff like this has to happen, but it does. And until there is a mutual agreement with certain parties, nothing's ever going to be fixed.
Why is Homeland Security here? There's a wall of Homeland Security. Because we're on the border. Like I told somebody. They do?
This is videotaping, by the way.
Did you see these assholes over here?
The police?
Their microphone, the recording.
They're scanning your face.
Because I got
So this dark board,
60 of them.
that looks like
so that's
an undercover cop car.
Hey, bingo! You're a genius there.
And there is the,
yeah, there you go.
Okay, and then that's the police over there. I got it.
You know how many trillion?
nonsense that could go to education, healthcare, but no, but it's stupid toys for stupid men who have a fucking dick complex.
I guess they're trying to put together who everyone is. I don't know what their relationships are between each other. So they're trying to, they go to bring this to every.
I know what they do. I know about all that stuff, and it's a complete waste of money. Since 9/11, what have they done since 9/11? They've arrested grandmas and fucking bacon circles. They've trumped up charges against social activists.
Yeah.
Since 9/11, all the jobs it's created. The Border Patrol went from being like a little shack over there by Kennedy Park on the west side to a sprawling mega complex of military base.
Yeah.
Big business.
It is. It's
Beer.
big business.
Beer is big business.
And then when they want to cut down the military and lay some people off, they're like, "But the economy and jobs." Fuck you. Go learn a skill. Do something with your life. Military stuff.
Well, it should. It should. It should do something in the name of defense. But it's not. Yeah,
It's not defense. It's not defense. It should be called an armed war because that's what they do.
And people are so thrown into their fear and their irrational.
It's irrationality and ignorance about what this country really is and what it's supposed to stand for. Ideals and what's required.
Oh, I got some of yours. I'll get them both. Thank you.
I couldn't keep up.
Oh, you couldn't keep up?
I could not keep up.
You were with the...
Yes, sir. My family's been against racism for 100 years. My dad proved it 70 years ago in World War II. They were disciples of Christ and Methodists.
They approved or disapproved?
No, we hate racism.
Oh.
And they understood Nazism and fascism.
The protesters aren't the only one in black, huh?
That's right.
Just wrong to be preyed on.
That's true.
It's not wrong to be prayed for, but just preyed on. I thought that was an important part of it.
Well, a trip, I gotta run into something like this.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. But look at this cop car over here. Look at the camera on the back of that thing. You should see that. See this truck?
Yeah.
See, there's a camera in back.
Yeah.
That thing, they had it fully extended when they were out at the church and stuff.
Oh, it's a rugby.
Hey, how's it going, Marlon? Good to see you again.
But they're practicing the American right to free speech, and I think I encourage that. If it's done peacefully, how can I not encourage it? Now this is an issue. Look at
this. Look at this horn on this car. Wow.
That's a top one.
Free speech.
Yeah, totally. But it's interesting, though. I mean,
isn't this a little much? Well, yeah. Yeah. A lot of police, though. Thank you, sir. During the 4th Avenue stretch of the protests, there was some chants against the police. So one of them you conveyed to me after the protest, attack the police. What are your ultimate thoughts on that chant in particular? I assume that chant was started by the Anti-Colonial Anarchist Bloc group.
Correct.
But what are your personal thoughts on that kind of hate towards the police speech?
You know, it's interesting. See, one of the movements that I've been involved in for a while now is anti-police brutality. And I've actually gone to protest, basically when there's been these cases of police shooting unarmed, people, there's been a lot of protests against it because, I believe in the right, to keep and bear arms. I believe in the right to self-defense and so forth. But, as someone who's just a civilian, I mean, you can't shoot somebody that's unarmed. I mean, you can't do that. So when police do that, and here they are very, very well trained, I think to me, it's something that should be spoken out against, something that should be addressed. Now, with anarchism, basically anarchism is no government, no hierarchies whatsoever. So anarchism is going to be opposed to any type of policing at all. When I do these anti-police marches, just because of the type of politics, usually the anarchists are very involved in that kind of activism. Anyway, the point that I'm getting at is, these types, I didn't agree with the chants that they had, and they weren't my chants. I didn't agree with them. For one, the march was not an anti-police march. It wasn't an anti-police brutality march. It was a stand-up against hate march. At the same time, I know where there's kind of an intersection of issues where, some of the hate, racism and bigotry and hatred is also institutionalized. I mean, there actually was an FBI report that came out not too long ago detailing that there is an issue of white supremacy within local police departments across the country. So there is a relevancy to, not just standing up against hateful individuals, but also addressing institutions, government entities and so forth that have that type of issue. Without rambling, basically, I didn't like those chants though because, it didn't apply. We're standing up against Islamophobia, we're standing up against bigotry and hate, and in this case, the police weren't brutalizing us. The police weren't attacking us, the police weren't preventing us from exercising any of our rights. On the contrary, the police were actually very professional, and they actually approached me and a couple others who were in the front, and they actually offered, to escort us, without a permit, without, having, they actually extended their invitation, so to speak. So there was no reason to say attack the police because the police weren't harming us.
Right, they were actually directing traffic in there.
Exactly, so I definitely didn't agree with that.
Okay.
On another day, in another context, if they are brutalizing people and stuff like that, that's different, But they weren't doing that here, so it wasn't a good chant.
Okay.
I'll just say also, I mean, it's kind of what with the anti-police chants that occurred. It's kind of the result of like what I said about when you have different politics. People of different politics coming together on a common cause. Sometimes you will have that kind of splitting up of ideologies where, the stand up against hate group that I, created, and then the anarchist Black Bloc, or the Anti-Colonial anarchist Black Bloc that they created, even though we were working together to stand up against bigotry, racism and Islamophobia and hate, that's where some of the politics started to diverge as they went into anti-police politics, whereas we wanted to keep it strictly, anti-bigotry in general.
So did you have any problems with the police during the whole protest? Personally,
I actually,
or anybody who did?
Not that I know of. Into the, the one that the stand up against hate in Tucson, they actually were very, hands off. I mean, they didn't, we took the street at some point and, they didn't tell us to get out of the street. They let us march, and they actually, a motorcycle officer had actually approached and said, just tell us where you want to go and we'll help you get there. So they actually, I've been to other protests, particularly in Phoenix, where, the police actually can get very aggressive, where, I mean, if you don't color within the lines, they want you to color in. They'll be like, stop or you will be arrested, or get out of the street, and they can get very aggressive. But I have to say, no complaints whatsoever. I had no problem with them at all in Tucson. I think they actually, I mean, I will, I'll give credit where it's due. They did a good job, and I'm glad of that.
They abided by what the
Yeah,
laws.
they allowed us to practice our constitutional rights, and that's what I wanted.
And
they didn't interfere with our right to, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. They didn't interfere with any of our rights. But, once the anarchists started those anti-police chants, what had happened was a large portion of our stand-up against hate group had already left. So the dynamics had changed, and at that point, I'm not gonna, I didn't think it was appropriate for me to, to just start dictating what people do. Given that I'm also standing for freedom of speech. A lot of people actually criticize me, saying, that I should have had better control, and that I should have prevented the anarchists from saying those chants and so forth. But I intentionally said at the beginning, I'm not going to tell people what to say or do. I'm not going to say what you can and cannot wear. I'm not going to say, as long as you're standing up against hate.
And doing it peacefully.
Exactly. I had no problem with it. I had talked to an attorney previously. It wasn't necessarily about this particular protest, but we were talking about like constitutional issues. And, he was explaining, a lot of times there's this misconception, the police in cities will often say you need a permit. But the Constitution, you don't need a permit to, to exercise, certain rights. But there can be kind of this gray area that he was explaining where, like, for safety reasons or for things like that, sometimes, police can say that they don't want you in the street because that's where the cars are. Sometimes they won't want you on the sidewalk because, pedestrians trying to get by. And it can go back and forth. But constitutionally, they have to allow you to protest. They can't restrain your ability to assemble.
Tucson Ward 6 council member Steve Kozachik said in the July newsletter that the people of the Let Freedom Ring rally didn't show up, but instead spent the day sending offensive text messages to the leadership of the mosque. He continued to add, the counter-protests spent about an hour up on Speedway in Euclid, displaying their banners and ignoring the fact that the police department of the area had invested many work hours trying to ensure their right to speak and to ensure the right would not be infringed of those others. Neither of those groups, he had messages reflecting the values of the community. Kozachik thanked all law enforcement involved, as well as the Islamic Community Center of Tucson leadership, for their willingness to work proactively to ensure that last Saturday's protest and counter-protest didn't end in violence. He also mentioned that Tucson Police Department reached out to all parties involved ahead of the rally and counter-protest in saying, and I quote, ironically, the Stand Up Against Hate group refused to meet and talk in setting boundaries so the public was assured of non-violent events.
I think it happens probably with most all religions, including my religion, is, you have the original teachings.
The core values.
The core value, yeah, exactly. You have the core values and the original teachings, which I, as a Muslim, I actually believe they are pretty, the core values are actually the same in all of the Abrahamic faiths. What happens is it's people that over time like to change things for their conveniences. Corrupt leaders, just, people, for different reasons, people like to change things.
Or pervert it.
Exactly. And you have this going on now, it happens with Islam too, where you have extremists that, they say, well, this is Islam. And it's not. There was an example, there was like a news article or something where I think it was ISIS had killed a dozen teenagers or something because they were watching TV. And it's like, what? There's nothing in Islam. Of course, it's just absolute extremism, fanaticism. And so, but you've had this historically with Christianity, and other religions as well.
How I see Jesus, I guess, is he was someone who stood up and questioned authority.
Oh,
He
yes.
questioned the governmental authorities. He questioned the religious authority and challenged them with his own logic. And it seemed to thrive in the hearts of people.
Exactly. It's interesting you mentioned this when I talk about too, like, questioning authority and holding leaders accountable is, in my belief, pretty much all of the prophets, peace be upon them all, they actually did question, most of them did question the leaders of their time. I mean, like Moses, peace be upon him, stood up to Pharaoh. And a lot of them absolutely, questioned the government and said, all these different things that were wrong with the leaders of their time. Whether it was, Muhammad, peace be upon him, had to deal with the Quraysh tribe and so forth. But what happens is, like, when you look at religions now, there's always this same cycle throughout human societies, as long as human societies have existed, that leaders want to hold their authority. They don't want to be held accountable. And the last thing they want is for people to go back to those core teachings. They don't want people to go to the true teachings and say, wait a minute, actually, because you can take the true religious teachings and then actually look at the religious leaders of your own religion and say, you're not following this. You're distorting it, and they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
But they need to hear it.
Well, I agree, but it's a tough battle.
It's a tough battle.
When you study religions,
but it's politics too.
Yeah, when you study religion and politics, you find out that that's a common theme. Well,
they're intertwined.
You're right.
I mean, they are.
They take advantage.
As a major source of protecting our liberties, the framers of our Bill of Rights were most concerned about the kind of tyranny where a government could censor us from important or even unimportant information that might expose unjust actions for public debate, and is one of the greatest rights we have in combating the possibility of tyrannical government. A free press is essential for a political system to work, as it helps us make informed decisions and also hold elected officials accountable. The Freedom of Press Clause guarantees that people can publish any lawful material without fear of punishment by the government, even if that material is critical of the government. This right may prevent our government from censoring the press. However, this right is not absolute, as press can be censored for reasons of national security, including hiding state secrets that may make our leaders look bad. The ultimate job of the media should be to keep a close eye on politicians that violate our U.S. Constitution. So get your asses up there and do it.
Our country was founded on the concept of freedom, but without the concept of respect, our American ideas for freedom, for all, can never be achieved by any sense of logic or reason. Instead of trying to have a greater understanding into the ideas and thoughts of another, we tend to trip up in confusion and misunderstanding. So often, religion is perverted into a belief of hate through the promotion of a false enemy or falsehoods of the overall philosophy. It should please everyone when followers and leaders of faith get it right. The values that our country has as the foundation in our Constitution and Bill of Rights needs to be protected by all of us, every American, to ensure freedom for all. Samaya Daoud had the courage not only to confront an intimidating and verbally hostile environment that the Phoenix protests cultivated, to having the faith and courage to organize and practice our own unique right to the freedom of speech and speak the same language in protest against what she saw as an unfair assessment of all Muslims and hate. Dean Remington, who was inspired to organize a protest to address fears of how radical Islam can and is affecting us inside our country today. Remington's open-mindedness and courage led him to have a peaceful and productive dialogue with the Islamic Community Center of Tucson, addressing his legitimate fears and concerns. In both cases, it should be an inspiration to everyone to stand up to confront our most difficult problems that we are facing as a nation directly.
When you speak the truth, it's kind of like the phrase, the pen is mightier than the sword. And, You know, you have these people that they try to change the world with guns. You know, they want to go to war, they want to fight, they want to kill, they want to force their beliefs and their values on others.
But when you speak your truth peacefully, what happens?
It's true. I think that, you know, I think the most powerful thing a person can do is tell the truth. That's the most powerful thing a person can do. If you have a huge group of committed people to stand up for truth and justice, you don't need a gun. I mean, you know, it's... That's, I mean...
You believe in your right to defend.
Yeah, I totally believe in the right to self-defense. So, I mean, I'm not, like, I wouldn't fall into the category of pacifists or, like, you know, or anti-war in the sense that, you know, you do have the right to defend yourself.
That is the kind of thing you guys want to wrap up by saying that
I just want to say, you know, I appreciate all the people like you as far as out there, you know, from Voices of Global Freedom and from your organization, putting some of the truth, breaking them down in layman's terms so people understand what the Patriot movement is about and kind of get away from some of those stereotypes like, you know, we're anti-government, anti-race, religion, bigotry, hatred. That's not the case at all, because I come from a very, very Christian upbringing, and I was raised in the Deep South, just like John. I was raised on a farm in Alabama, and so basically I went from California to New York to raised on a farm in Deep South Alabama. I've seen all the racial, the hatred, and all that stuff, and then went right back to New York again, inner city, and seen it all over again from a different dynamic. So what's happening here in America is a cultural, diverse shift, and it's allowed to happen because it's happening from the top. It's not happening from the inner city. It's not happening from state resources. It's happening from the top down. And when you allow it to happen and you make excuses, you commend bad behavior, or you just turn a blind eye to it, there you've instituted a problem. And it's coming from the top. It's not. I don't believe it's at our lowest level. It's coming from a high level, and it's being pushed at. It's being definitely been. It's like this, and it's not good what they're doing. I mean, it's, you know, especially being in a 2016. Yeah.
John Ritzheimer organized a second freedom of speech rally at the Phoenix Mosque on October 10th. I will leave you with video footage from Samaya Dode's YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.
This is not a religion of tolerance. This is not a religion of acceptance. Heck, this religion isn't even humane to its own people. This is the actual mosque that sent out the Garland shooters.
No!
This isn't your just mosque. I don't believe that there's any Muslims. They're all bad. They're all bad? They're all bad. They're all bad. Their founder was a pedophile. I thought Muslims don't accept transvestites. Why don't you leave not here or cause you to embrace the things that we have embraced. We are here as peaceful people. That is all.
If you like this video, please like it below. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe to Tillmann News Information. Make a positive impact in the world that we live in. Thank you. And if you don't, fuck you. Thank you very much for watching.